Well, welcome everyone to our third session of the Gig Harbor Climate Change Comprehensive Plan Amendment Committee, or the CCC PAC. If you could please mute yourselves while we're getting started here, and just raise your hand and I can call on you while we're going through questions and answers and that type of stuff. I'd appreciate it. Just some kind of housekeeping things. As you might recall from previous sessions, this is being recorded, and this video link is public. So please keep your cameras on and participate to your fullest ability since the public is watching. We got some feedback about the note-taking kind of rotation. And I do just want to acknowledge that I understand that the note taker may not be able to participate as fully as people who aren't taking notes, but that's why we're trying to rotate this responsibility. So do I have a note taker for this session? Preferably not a young woman, since we had 2 young women the last 2 times, and we do not want to pigeonhole those types of people into a secretarial role.
Okay, would you take an old man?
Absolutely. Thank you, Roger.
All right, I will do the best I can.
And then yeah, don't worry about it. You'll do great. And then as a reminder, I am going to ask you to submit 2 goals and policies based on the information presented in this session after the session, before our next session on July 14th, I believe. And then we're just going to briefly go over the homework responses that I have received. So in response to our previous session talking about regional approaches, I got a lot of goals and policies related to information sharing and systems around regional collaboration. Goals for coordination with local organizations, including Pierce County, regional organizations such as PSRC and MRSC, and as well as Washington State on method, science, and data collection. Also, a lot of goals and policies around transportation improvements, the diversification of transportation modes, and coordination of transportation types and systems across, with a public health focus across our region. Also got quite a few goals and policies related to our urban forest and the urban forestry plan. Any questions about the previous homework and what I have received? Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Roxy, for those of us who might be a little late on our homework, will we still be able to submit that homework to you prior to the next meeting?
Yeah, unless your dog ate it, and then, I'm not going to expect you to, get it out of the dog's stomach or whatever.
Okay. And that was for all of those others who haven't gotten their homework in, because of course I have. So I was asking the question sort of for the collective good here.
Yeah, just get it to me when you can. I don't want you to have to, write me an essay about goals and policies before the end of this process.
Okay.
Go ahead, Barbara.
I remember the request for 2 draft policies, but it sounds like you also wanted goals, 2 draft goals.
Goals and or policies. A lot of people have kind of like drafted a goal and then put some policies behind it. It's really kind of like the level to which, or the capacity that you have. I'm not going to be really like tracking this, but I would really appreciate feedback so that I can funnel it into this comprehensive plan amendment that we're going towards.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right. So just another overview of what we're doing here. We are moving towards a comprehensive plan amendment to include climate change into our comprehensive plan, since it's not currently named, or and we don't have any goals or policies related to climate change in our comprehensive plan. So right now in these sessions, we are learning about topics including state and regional requirements related to climate change, mitigation, and resilience. based on the stuff that we learn in these sessions, and then the homework, the goals and policies that you all draft and send to me, I'm going to draft an amendment to the comprehensive plan. And then we'll review it in August. And then based on the draft, make more edits, and then get it through the legislative process, get it to the Planning Commission in early September. So we are on our third session. We're going to be talking about buildings and energy with our two esteemed presenters today. We previously kind of introduced climate change, and we heard from PSRC about their approach on a regional level. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Beth Dolio. They are a consultant with Climate Solutions, which is a kind of think tank and research consultancy. And they're going to talk to us about electrification of buildings, among many other interesting things. So Beth, please take it away.
All right, thank you. Let's see if this works here. Uh-oh. Okay. I am going to talk, as Roxy said, about the future of buildings and how that fits into our overall projections around how we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions based, the scientific projections on how much we need to reduce and how buildings fit into that. And I'm very excited that you are taking this on, and I look forward to a very spirited discussion. Just by way of introduction, I was on the staff of Climate Solutions for 13 years as the campaign director. I served in the legislature from 2017 to 2021, and I'm now consulting with them, and they are a full service policy shop working at the local and state level, and also do a lot of work on regulatory work in this space. It's weird. That's not letting me move it. So why buildings and why now, right? You probably have think about our biggest emissions being transportation and coal and oil, but a lot of what we'll be focusing on at the local and the state level and federal level actually moving forward is really buildings. So next slide. Can you help me with that? No, I'm not. Okay, so I'm just going to take us quickly through the policy framework in Washington State. We are actually really ahead of the game in terms of having a policy framework, but I think it's really important to sort of review that and look at how buildings fit into that picture. So the legislature in 2019 passed a number of bills that really set us up for success. We are looking at 100% clean electricity by 2045. So that is basically saying by 2045, we're going to have moved coal, oil, gas out of our electric sector. And that electric generation will be through solar, wind, hydro. We already are we are lucky in this state to have the amount of hydro that we have. We only have a very small amount of fossils actually in our statewide electric portfolio, but we also have a plan to move that out of our electric grid. So we're moving towards a very clean, green electric grid, and there's some benchmarks along the way. So by 2030, we'll essentially be net zero with the use of renewable energy credits and offsets, and then by 2045, it will be complete. On the transportation side, we did also pass the clean fuel standard. I believe that was in 2020. And that basically says, here's the carbon intensity of our fuels in this state, and we're going to ratchet that down. And fossil fossil fuels, those who produce and distribute those will have to essentially buy credits to help them reduce the carbon intensity of our fuels over time. And then last year, I wasn't in the legislature when this passed, but the Climate Commitment Act passed, and that sets up a cap and trade system. And so our largest polluters are also going to have to buy credits to have the right to pollute and put greenhouse gases into the air. And then they will actually be used, that those dollars, which we'll start to see coming into our state in January of this year, will be used specifically to help the transition away from fossil fuels. And the bill that I prime sponsored and passed, the Building Performance Standard, it sets a, which was passed in 2019, it sets an efficiency standard, an energy use standard for our largest commercial buildings, so 50,000 square feet and above. And it starts to say, it says in 2026, you big buildings who are 20,000 square feet and 200,000 square feet and larger, you're going to have to actually meet a standard and not surpass the amount of energy that we want you to use as a large building. And then the square footage begins to ratchet down. There was a bill passed last year and it lowered that to 20,000 square feet. And those buildings will have to start what's called benchmarking and actually looking at how much energy a building uses and reporting that data to the state. But in 2026, those larger buildings, including municipal buildings, I should say, given that you probably have a stock of municipal buildings, your fire stations, your public works building, your administration buildings, they will also have to comply. So that is something that you'll want to look at as a city and make sure and start to do those energy audits if you haven't started doing that, so that you can kind of get a sense of how much you're going to have to do to kind of retrofit your buildings to comply with that state standard. Okay, so why buildings, right? We've got all this policy framework in place. It seems like Washington's in great state of play here in terms of reducing our emissions. But the truth of the matter is that what you do at the local level is really important to the overall goal of us meeting those emission reductions. And unfortunately, emissions from buildings are on the rise, and that's due to the fact that many of the appliances that we use in our homes are fueled by fossil fuels. They're fueled by gas, natural gas. And natural gas, while it was viewed as a transition fuel for some time, is still a fossil fuel and does contribute significantly to our greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, we're not like kind of starting to slow that down. At least one new house every minute hooks up to gas every year nationwide. So that's a lot of homes and a lot of gas hookups that are continuing to put emissions into the air that we could avoid. And we could particularly avoid it in our state because we can move those buildings to the electric grid, which is over time getting much more green, right? Because we passed that 100% clean electricity bill. That is the linchpin really of moving our transportation and our buildings onto the electric grid, is making sure that we're making that electric grid green. So just to give you a sense, buildings are the fastest growing source of carbon emissions in Washington. And you can see that that is moving up over time. Oh. And I didn't, okay. And we also know from the state energy plan, which was done in 2021 as a part of the CETA, is the Clean Energy Transformation Act, which is the 100% clean electricity that I referred to earlier. We know from work done there from the state energy plan that electrification of our buildings is the lowest cost pathway to helping us meet our emissions. So that's really why there's such a focus on buildings right now. We can actually stop utilizing gas in our buildings right now. We have the technology to do that. We just need the political will. We need you to write it into your comprehensive plan. That is a place that it is perfectly legitimate to have. I've been working a little bit with Pierce County on this. They're thinking of doing that within their comprehensive plan. You can basically say, we want to build all electric in our community from now on. And that's something that Berkeley actually set the mark on, and I believe it was 2019. They stopped allowing gas hookups for residential and commercial buildings in their community. And about 65 other communities in 7 states have already taken that step. And we'll get to the fact that Washington has taken half of the step later on in the presentation. I just wanted to really get a little bit granular about what that looks like in a home. So primarily it's the heat pumps for your, primarily it is gas furnaces and gas water heaters that contribute the most emissions in your home, but it's also appliances like your stove and your stove. And so what we are suggesting is that you move to heat pumps for both space heating. And the really great thing there is, unfortunately, we're having to adapt to the higher temperatures, which I think we're about to potentially move into here. I know it's been quite cold lately, but it also provides cooling. A heat pump provides both heating and cooling. And there's also water heaters that are fueled by electricity as well. So just to really get down to the percentage, you're really going to want to look at those heat pumps. That's the first thing in a house to really retrofit out, or to make sure in a new building that heat pump for space heating and cooling, that's the largest source of use in the home, energy use in the home, and that's followed by the water heater. There are some other things, pools and hot tubs and clothes dryers, and electric grills is something we were experimenting with that for Father's Day, because we actually don't have a grill, and I guess there's the whole point of grilling is not really to have an electric grill. That's what my kids told me, and they don't really have those yet, but anyway, let's hope that happens as well. So but there are really good alternatives to a lot of other things that we're using in our house that are currently fueled by fossils. Okay, so why does gas use matter from a health perspective? So while the greater emissions actually come from those heating and cooling for our water and space, the most air pollution issue in a house is that, unfortunately, that gas stove. And children living in homes with gas stoves like mine, like I'm having to go through this in my own home. I have a gas stove, I have a gas furnace, and children, although they're moving out. The last one just graduated yesterday, as a matter of fact. They're 42% more likely to have asthmatic symptoms. We're burning a fossil fuel in our home. You can definitely help to eliminate some of the toxics that are coming from that, and the air pollution coming from that, by turning on your ventilation. And I wasn't personally doing that, and now it's like every time we turn on the stove in any way whatsoever, that hood goes on. So that does help to mitigate some of the toxics, but certainly not all. And the best solution is to move to an induction or electric resistance stove. And these are just some of the pollutants that that come out of a stove, and some of the things that you will be have health issues around. It's really not a good thing. So we need to move away from it. It's also bad for outdoor air pollution, particularly your furnace, because it vents out. Hot water heaters need venting, and so we know that buildings in Washington generate more than 2 times as much NOx as all of the power plants combined. So clearly something we need to start working to reduce. And finally, it really is quite an equity issue. We know that communities who have been redlined or segregated are pushed to places where there already is a higher level of pollution in general. And this just adds to that issue. So when you're thinking about your planning in your city, we want to make sure that any kind of state dollars or local dollars that are going to address this issue for residents really target low-income people, and then and marginalized communities as well. Super important. Just to mention, we have had pipeline explosions. Gas is not a thing that, it's highly flammable. Pipelines are underground. They definitely cause problems. Our stove, our gas stove, sometimes it doesn't quite light up and gas is spewing into our kitchen. That is not an uncommon thing. And there's lots of calls that go into 911 about gas leaks in homes. And we did, experience a gas explosion in Seattle's Greenwood neighborhood that did level quite a few buildings and did create quite some dollars of damage, $3 million of damage. So moving to the electric grid again has some other benefits to it as well. Earthquakes. So earthquakes and actually avalanches. My son is a cook. And he was stationed in, well, he was not stationed, he was in Jackson Hole, Wyoming after graduating from college as a ski bum, and also worked in a restaurant at the top of the gondola there. And they were an all electric kitchen because of the dangers of avalanche. And so again, that story sort of demonstrates, he was overhearing me talk about, because he's back home now, talking to me about electricity. He's like, I worked in an all electric kitchen and here's why. And so I think it shows two things. One, you can move, restaurants can move to all electric, and also sort of the safety impacts of that as well. Okay, so what does it mean in the community in terms of jobs? So there is, concern as we move away from fossil fuels that people are going to, who work in those industries, plumbers and pipe fitters, people who work at the refineries. It is definitely an issue. It is something that we are taking very seriously and looking at workforce plans to help make that transition. But we also know that this retrofit and the need to transition, it creates a lot of jobs in the process of doing that. We certainly are having workforce issues with not enough folks. So there is also a lot of work going into creating a workforce to actually be able to pull off this transition over time. The other piece is cost. It does save on the upfront costs of new buildings, not existing. Retrofitting existing buildings is expensive, but building new buildings all electric actually does save money. You're not paying for the gas hookup, and ultimately the cost of operations and maintenance of those buildings tends to be lower as well, because electricity tends to be less expensive than gas. And as we build the market, as we transform the market and purchase more and have the policies in place that force that, the prices will come down, just a simple supply and demand. At least we're hoping. I know we're having a lot of inflation right now, so you can't necessarily, I can't say that 100%, but that is the idea behind the policies, right, is to create that market transformation to bring down those prices over time. And the most important thing in terms of new buildings is basically, at some point, we know we're gonna have to have gas out of our buildings, right? We can't meet our greenhouse gas emission reduction goals unless our buildings are all electric or near all electric. And so it's better to do that up front because like I said, it is expensive to retrofit. So let's start doing that now. Let's not continue to build the hole any deeper by continuing to build buildings with fossil fuels. All right, so how do we do that? This is the fun stuff. So I just want to touch briefly on the State Building Code Council. So our codes are updated every 3 years. They're basically divided into commercial codes, which includes multifamily, 4 stories and above, and any other commercial building. And then there's also our residential codes, which is our single family residencies and also anything below 3 stories and below. So we recently went through the State Building Code is 15 people that's appointed by the governor that represent various different expertise, building, architects. There's a disability seat, there's local government, county government on that code council. And they also bring in technical expertise in a process called the Technical Advisory Group, the TAGs. And they get updates. Kathleen actually will talk more about this. She actually submits some updates given in her role. And then these tags sort of look through those and say, we think this should move forward, this shouldn't for these reasons. And we were able to move through the tags and through the Building Code Council as a whole, basically updates that eliminate the use of gas in our commercial buildings starting in July of 2023. So you will actually be subject to those as a city, as a county, and they follow other cities who are already doing that and have enacted those separately, because in the commercial codes in the state, local jurisdictions can have codes that are stronger than the state minimum. And that's for commercial. So keep that in mind because I'm going to get to residential in a minute. Seattle Shoreline and Bellingham have made those changes already, and they've actually go even beyond what the state adopted. But that everyone will sort of move to these new codes for commercial buildings in 2023, July of 2023. Okay, so just getting a little bit more granular in what you can do at the local level. So upcoming is the State Building Code Council Residential Code update. And that acts as the ceiling. You as a city can't go very much further. There is a process by which you can do that. And some communities do that, but you have to get it approved by the State Building Code Council. And it's a little bit more onerous than having codes at the commercial level that are slightly stronger than the state. But we are in the process of that, and we do have a requirement to use heat pumps for space heating and cooling, also for water heating. And we have 2 ventilation updates as well that require better ventilations above gas stoves if you do get that gas hookup and use a gas stove. We are in the process of seeing if those move out for public comment. And there will be another meeting to determine that. A lot of cities and city officials and sustainability directors are engaging in this process and urging the State Building Code Council to adopt these changes, because we know that we want to do this on a statewide level, just like we did with the commercial codes. It was really fantastic that Seattle, Bellingham, and Shoreline did that, but it really makes more sense for us to have those codes statewide, so that we're not communities aren't competing against each other around building codes. So the building performance standard is another place where Seattle is actually making a lot of headway. So the bill that I passed that set the statewide building performance standard can be improved upon, and that's something that you as a local community could commit to doing. The ones past the state level is based on energy use. And we'd like to see local communities actually base it on emissions. That will get much more at the gas use in buildings than the energy use, because actually there are quite efficient gas appliances out there. So you can reduce your energy use while not reducing your emissions to the level that need to be reduced to meet our emission standards. Another thing that communities are doing is they're helping they're helping low income and moderate income families actually make these changes in their homes. So there's 5 cities that are on the east side of King County that have banded together. Bellevue, Mercer Island, Kirkland, Issaquah, and Redmond, I believe it is, will launch a heat pump campaign that are providing some city dollars to residents who want to make that transition in their home. And again, they're putting those dollars into low income homes. So that's something that you could consider as a city. The other piece is your own commitment. So Olympia and Tacoma started with resolutions that said we're committing to making our new buildings, in terms of public works buildings, fire stations, whatever you're building in, starting now, those are going to be all electric. But that's probably pretty much the case with the new state building codes. So we're at the point where we think that cities should commit to retrofitting their existing municipal buildings. So again, like I said, that's expensive, and I'm going to be hopefully back in the legislature working on some funding solutions to help you do that. But making that commitment and working with state legislators, working in your own community to figure out how you can fund that is really important. Some communities like Bellevue, for example, is about to run an open space and parks initiative, and they are actually writing into the bond that goes out to voters that retrofit cost. So that is one way, if you have something like that coming up, you can think about writing that actually into your ballot measure. And then finally, we do have some opportunities to just get out at farmers markets and do some cooking demonstrations with an induction burner and talk kind of about how this is important overall and help folks think about starting to make those transitions in their homes and in their commercial buildings. And I'm definitely able to get you information on that and help make that happen in Gig Harbor. So I think that's it. And I guess, Roxy, I don't know if you want to do questions now based on that, or if you want to wait till Kathleen gives her presentation.
No, I think this is a great stopping point to ask questions about your presentation, and then we'll do like 10 minutes of questions, and then we'll take a 5-minute break.
Awesome. Okay. So it looks like John is first.
Yeah, off mute there. So question for you on this. So my family has wind farms in Eastern Washington, and they have to get turned off many times just because the dams are producing too much energy for our grid. So if we're doing more current draw, getting away from natural gas, what's going on with the grid? Is there plans to upgrade the main electrical grid to be able to handle the new draw from switching away from natural gas? And then on top of that, what happens if the people actually succeed in getting rid of the dams? Do we have enough energy to be able to generate too?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. We are moving. We need to move a lot of our hydro out of state, which we already do, right? So we need to continue to do that to help other communities actually green their own grid, right? So there is a tremendous amount of work and thinking going on around how the grid responds to the changes that we need to make over time. So for example, the Utilities and Transportation Commission has a docket open that is looking at the future of gas and how we plan to that. What are the utilities? The utilities are responsible to the UTC for providing a plan and their integrated resource planning that they have to do on a regular basis. And so they are overlaying that now with a very significant conversation about the future of gas. If we do, the movement around Snake River dams and the removal of those is, it's a very live conversation, right? There's a lot of energy around trying to make that happen. And there's some really good analysis that I'm happy to provide to you from the Northwest Energy Coalition around how we can continue to meet the electric needs and clean electricity needs while we remove the dams as well. And I guess the other big piece of that is that all of these appliances that we were talking about installing are actually much more efficient than what a lot of people have in their homes now. So they'll be using less electricity, and that's also good, you know, for utility costs and that sort of thing. But I will add to my, I'm going to do some follow-up materials, and I will add the Northwest Energy Coalition Snake River Dam little one pager on it.
Yeah, and for the energy consumption, I know that natural gas furnaces take 15 amps, 110, but a heat pump takes 220, 20, plus your 15 amps or even higher for your blower inside your main furnace too. So, I mean, it is still a chunk of electricity that's drawn by the system. I don't dispute one single bit that heat pumps are way better than just electric furnace. That's night and day difference when it comes to energy usage. And I also do worry too for people who live out, not Gig Harbor, but remote areas where energy failure or power outages are more common. I think of our outage in Federal Way back, what was it, 2006, where we were out of power for 6 days. And you could heat your house on a little small generator there with natural gas. But with electric, you'd be toast, to put it, well, you'd be cold.
Yeah, a lot of the new gas appliances, however, require electricity to work. So it's not quite as easy as it used to be to actually use gas appliances in a power outage.
Yeah, I think statewide, my biggest concern is that we don't become a Texas, to put it bluntly. I mean, they constantly have problems down there because the grid just can't handle the draw, and I know ours is aged. So
yeah, I mean, the good thing is that Texas is the Wild West, and they don't really have any regulation. I mean, the bad thing is they don't really have any regulation. They just started putting all this stuff up, and there was no plan. And I'd say that, you know, we're lucky to live, you know, sometimes we're lucky, there's a lot of regulations, and sometimes it's terrible, but I do think that we are much more intentional about how we plan and what is required by the state of our utilities and the Utilities and Transportation Commission. So I think I don't think we'll be a Texas.
sure. Thank you.
That's my crystal ball for you. Jenny.
Yes, thank you. That's
Jenny?
an excellent presentation. So thanks so much. I want to talk about House Bill 1770 that failed last year, and it would have allowed cities to have more stringent recommendations or regulations than what the state allows. So I spoke in favor of that as a council person from Gig Harbor. I also spoke in favor of more strict regulations before the State Building Code Council, but we still don't have, I mean, how do we get new bills required to put in heat pumps when it's not in the state? And so we can't do anything more stringy. We can't do that, can we?
Well, you can't do that as a city, but through the State Building Code Council, they are considering those residential updates, which would eliminate the need for House Bill 1770 altogether. And thank you for testifying in that. I actually had that in my green buildings bill, but that part of it was just so controversial. And part of that is it, you know, I think that's really what a council person should be saying to the code council is our community wants to do this, and we don't want to be doing it on our own. Like, people didn't like that. People didn't want 1770 to have different codes in different communities. And so it's just much more efficient and better to do it on a statewide level. So I will definitely follow up with you, council member. Is it Wook?
Wook. So then how do we have a chat and make inroads with the State Building Code Council? How do we do that?
So there is another meeting coming up, which I can alert you to. And it would be great to have your voice there.
I'd be happy to do that. So yes,
Awesome.
if you let me know.
Okay.
You bet. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Seeing more hands. Okay, Crystal.
I have a question. Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. I was really interested in some of your slides, the early slides about the policy goals of around 100% clean energy, electrification. Is that the state of Washington goals? Okay, so what I was wondering about around that is one thing you didn't mention is nuclear power. So I know the coal plant in Centralia is in the process of being shut down, which is good for climate. But I know the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, I recently learned, is proposing a small power plant there at that facility. And I was just wondering how does nuclear fit in with the state's policy, and is that just a non-starter, or
Yeah.
where does it fit in?
Oh, that was a really big issue in the negotiations of that bill. It's actually kind of silent on nuclear. It is other forms of energy are sort of on the hierarchy, are encouraged more than nuclear, but it doesn't completely rule out the possibility of new nuclear coming online.
Okay, and that's what I was wondering, is it considered clean energy by the state because it's not a greenhouse gas kind of emitting thing?
It's sort of not, it's just not really in the definition. It was sort of, we kind of got around that very, very sticky issue, is my recollection. So, because it is a carbon neutral, right? But it has a lot of other issues with it, sustainability issues, waste, water use, lots of things. So, but it's kind of interesting. I think we wanted to leave the door open because it's such a significant issue in terms of trying to figure out how to make this transition. There was desire to leave the door a little bit open for potential new technology around nuclear power. Small modular reactors, SMRs, are something that is potentially a cleaner version of nuclear power in a much smaller level in the future. And so there was a desire to kind of leave that window open.
Thank you.
Yeah. Robert.
So, sorry to interrupt. Let's just have Robert be the last question, and then we'll take a break so we can keep this discussion moving.
Hey, Beth, thanks for your presentation. A question for you on the residential building code projected date. The commercial was July 2023. What's your best sense of the residential code? Because that's pretty important to get the cover for the city from the state, basically.
Yeah, it would also be July of 2023. They take place all at the same time.
Oh, okay.
It's
But
just the process in the deliberation process. They do the commercial first, and then they do the residential. And so we're smack dab in the deliberation, and they need to wrap that up by December 1st under state statute. One other thing that's really interesting in our state statute that I didn't mention that's kind of important is that the legislature actually, and I think I think Rep. Kilmer actually represents Gig Harbor, right? Is that right? So he actually passed a bill that when he was in the state Senate that requires the state building code council, it mandates them with increasing our state building codes to get to 70% energy reduction under 2006 benchmark. And so it's basically it's basically net zero our buildings would be by 2031. And so the state legislature has actually mandated that to the state building code council, if that makes sense. And that was a bill that Congressman Kilmer passed years ago. All right, so Roxy, I think you wanted to take a short break and motion and move to Kathleen.
Yeah, thank you so much, Beth. I know that I think you have limited availability. You might have to jump off today. Yeah, so thank you so much for your expertise and for taking the time to talk to us. So let's adjourn to a 5-minute break. I will see you back here at 2:52.
And I will also just send some follow-up materials.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Should I send that to you?
Yes, and I can forward that on.
Great. Awesome. All
All right.
right.
Have a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. I know we have a few people we're still waiting to get back online. I'll wait for our note taker at least. Oh, Kyla, your cat is so cute.
It's that time of day where she's decided she has to be on the desk.
Yeah, of course. All righty. So yeah, let's get back to it. Our next presenter is the wonderful Kathleen Petrie.
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 Yeah.
Kathleen is the program manager for King County's Green Building community-wide program, and she's going to be talking to us about Green Building Code. So kind of an extension and elaboration on what we just heard from Beth. So Kathleen, why don't I let you take it away?
Yeah, thank you so much, Roxy, and thank you all for having me here today. And Beth did a fantastic job, and it's really neat to listen to what's going on at that legislative level and that you're already engaged there actively. That's fantastic. And so my job at King County is actually to promote green building by supporting jurisdictions and private partners. And so with the jurisdictions, we work on code development together. We provide trainings and other resources, tools that are needed by the jurisdictions to increase the amount of green building that's done within their realm. And then on the flip side, I work with projects, private projects, and whether it's just networking, getting them in touch with the right folks, the other jurisdictions, if it is funding the registration fees for their zero energy ILFI building or whatnot, just providing technical information, code information. That is my background. My background is as a technical code writer. I spent a good chunk of my past at City of Seattle and have had the pleasure to work with folks at county level now, which is pretty exciting. And Roxy, do I need to request remote control again? And we'll try this again. Did that go through? So I'm not able to move it forward, or is it Cindy?
Well, Kathleen, you still do have co-host classification. So from my end, you should be able to. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it says you have control.
Yeah, and I should just be able to down arrow. It is not working by chance. Would somebody by chance please be able to? Thank you very much. Next slide, please. And so a lot of what guides the work that I and many others at the county do is our strategic climate action plan. And so that is basically the blueprint for how we are going to spend our resources, our time, how we prioritize what is happening. Our SCAP we call it the SCAP, is comprised of 6 in the greenhouse gas emission chapter, reduction chapter. It has 5 or 6 areas associated with building energy, just green building in general, urban forestry, transportation. It's all about how we reduce greenhouse gas emissions across our built community. And next slide, please. And so what informs our SCAP? And so this one really is basically it mimics what Beth was saying, where we found that in King County, natural gas is 1/3 of our commercial emissions, and it's over 20% of our residential emissions. Next slide, please. So the intent of these is to figure out where we're starting from, so we know where to go. And so King County built this greenhouse gas emission carbon wedge, basically. And so this tells us what policies are in place associated with emissions and what we actually need to do. So in that graph where you're seeing the opaque colors, those are the policies in building and facility energy use and in transportation and whatnot that we can count on in order to get to our 2030 targets, our 2050 reduction targets. And the hatched areas are where I live, especially in that red zone, whereby it's like, what else do we need in place to fill that gap in order to achieve the pieces that are not already being done. So that's where we start from. And next slide, please. And so from that, we created our 2020 SCAP. And it has 3 primary sections. We already talked about the greenhouse gas emission reduction section. Then we have a whole chunk on our ESJ, which is our sustainable resilient frontline communities. We have a fantastic group of people who basically sit on a board and they provide guidance to the county when we are making our decisions around emission reduction. What impacts have been happening in their communities, the frontline communities, BIPOC communities? What is the storytelling that we need to hear in order to make those responsible decisions? So really creating that framework so that climate equity happens across the board for everybody, and to ensure that we're successful in that endeavor. Something to consider. And then we've got another section on, hey, it's already hot out. We need to now adapt. We can still try to slow things down, but really what do we have to do to make sure people are safe in these 105, 110 degree days that we've been hitting? So next slide, please. Oops, thank you. And so I don't know if Gig Harbor, I don't believe you have a climate action plan at this time. And it would be interesting for me to hear if in fact that's something that is under consideration, or that would be an advisement of this board. But there are a lot of jurisdictions in King County that didn't really know where to start. So just in the last year, the county has developed this climate action toolkit. And so it really just provides that pathway for jurisdiction to figure out, okay, how do I even get my feet going on the ground here? Who do I need to bring in? What technical considerations, what equity considerations? And then how do we prioritize all of these things that we've identified are our goal areas? And then the implementation, of course, and the loop back around our metrics of what is working and what is not working. So please know that that is a tool that is available to you. And links are throughout this document, so you have access to all of these. Next slide, please. So in the realm of building, you can go the route of incentives, which everybody loves, and it's amazing, and you get extra height, and you get fast permitting and big trade-offs, and maybe we have grant funding. And for very few jurisdictions do we really have anything to give away. But it is a fantastic tool if you have access to it. A jurisdiction like Seattle has time to give. And so what they do in the realm of incentives is they actually have cut in half the review time for green projects, and they doubled the amount of time for the non-green projects, because that's how they manage the volume, and their council allowed disincentives. So it's something in the realm of, with King County, we racked our brains in the single family realm. What are we going to do to incentivize a deep green residential building? We already have generous development standards and whatnot. The review time is nominal. There's nothing to give. And so, we figured out, okay, detached ADUs are actually in demand, and that is something that we could do in exchange for requiring a deeper green building in the residential portion. In the non-residential portion, we basically figured out that if you have a 6 or 7 mixed-use building, and one type of zone in unincorporated King County would be the only project that would truly benefit from the incentives that we had to provide. It was just too finite. We don't have that. And so incentives are great if Gig Harbor can find that sweet spot, and super support you in doing that. For folks like unincorporated King County, we land on regulation, and it's not fun. But industry adapts fast. With every code cycle, industry figures out how to move through it and get past the challenges before them. And especially when we're working at the state and even national levels, the fact that you have high volume reduces the prices of building elements very, very quickly. And also it makes sure that we all move forward together. So regulation is very equitable. And there's just a little map of my partner, Dwayne Johnlin at City of Seattle. He shows this. And basically those yellow bullseyes are cities that have very advanced energy codes, as well as flourishing economies. And so you see that, high energy code, and deeper regulation doesn't necessarily mean, and in fact, it truly means, especially when he does his building crane counts across the country, that those are communities that are flourishing. Next slide, please. So Shift Zero is a kind of a grassroots group comprised of a lot of professional industry partners. I believe Beth is a part of it. I know Climate Solutions is as well. And they interact with jurisdictions, they engage in policy development, and they support our needs to get to the next step. And so they've created this great toolkit that really focuses on incentives. So this might be something of interest in your evaluation of resources, whereby, you know, it talks about the different types of incentives you could pursue, whether it's going to be land use or marketing promotion, whatever is going to fit. And they basically create a matrix. If you're hoping to achieve this, then you would target these, you know, 8 areas. And it's a really fantastic resource. So I encourage folks to just be aware of it and to consider utilizing it. Next slide, please. So that code development process. This is a slide that I use at a lot of presentations. It's just a high-level overview. Our codes that we enforce, the state requires jurisdictions to enforce, are updated every 3 years. When the national code goes to the state, it gets sorted out into these technical advisory groups that Beth was saying. And basically each group takes on a code. And so those are the 6 codes, soon to be 7, that we are required to enforce. And that process is done over 2 years due to staff resourcing. It used to just be 1. And so the commercial multifamily portion is complete. It was completed as of April. We do know those amendments to the 2021 codes for commercial and multifamily that will be in that July 2023 publication that's happening. The codes up now are for small residential buildings, single family duplex house, and other units less than 3 or 3 stories or less, as well as for both the residential building portion as well as the energy portion. And so those conversations have been happening over the last 3 or 4 months. Folks have been submitting proposals, so which I'm going to share some of those with you at the end of this presentation. And we've been negotiating at a table, wordsmithing. There's been a lot of opposition and pros on all of these bits, and we're down to final testimony, which will be happening in both September and October. There will be one hearing, what is known as quote unquote on each side of the state. And so then once those codes are selected at the end of the year, we've got our full amendment package for everything. The state will then release it in July of 2021. We can modify those codes in gray, and the residential and small energy residential portions cannot be modified by us. You can take it to the state. I've done it once. It is incredibly challenging, very high losing rate in their support. So it's always best to get everything done at the state or national level so we don't have to have that fight locally. Next slide, please. So again, those final hearings, public testimony is very simple. It's very informal. If it's an online version, basically you just sign up in advance of the meeting. You provide verbal testimony. You can send letters between now and fall. You can propose modifications even at this point, and the council will take consideration. What we're trying to do for a lot of these very key proposals in the small residential energy portion, as well as some of our bits for electric vehicle charging, is we need the voices. We need mass, because we're getting tons of mass on the opposition side, and we need to have stronger voices saying, we need this done, we want this done. This is part of our comprehensive plan, a part of our climate action plans, because we need that help from the state. Again, a link to access that information. And next slide, please. So as Beth mentioned, we have a commercial energy code portion. Awesome. It's for, you know, commercial, multifamily, 4 stories and taller. It's basically a decarbonized code. Next slide, please. And I'm going to walk through what that what that really means, the elements of this. And so it means just what Beth was saying, we'll blow through some of these, but it's basically no electric resistance or fossil fuel across our buildings any longer. There are some modifications or some allowances in super tight, small spaces where heat pump just doesn't make financial sense, and or other special areas of a building. So, but yeah, heat pumps. And same thing. Oh, that's interesting. None of my headings are coming up. Yeah, heat pump water heaters, same thing, required for multifamily and commercial. Whoop, oh yeah, that's great. Thank you, Cindy. Solar is now a requirement for, oh, excuse me, that's supposed to be square feet, 10,000 square feet or greater for new buildings or additions. And it now requires that you have 0.5 watts per square foot, kilowatts per square foot, and which is double what was in the last code. So it's a nice increase. Next slide, please. In the plumbing code, or excuse me, I actually think this was a RCW. They reduced the shower max and lavatory faucets to 1.8 gallons per minute, which has been a huge lift. I believe it was at, for some of these, 2.0 since and higher. I mean, I think the last time this portion of the RCWs was updated was in the early 90s, and it allowed still 3 to 5 gallon toilet flushes. So this was a huge win. But as you can see, the faster we have water moving through, loses less heat, we're using less material, and it takes less energy to move everything through. So plumbing actually is, water comes with energy. And so that is another advantage of water conservation. Next slide, please. So as many of you have probably seen with your buildings where they're doing the air leakage testing. So basically you've got a big blower door test, it goes and it's sucking, basically creating a negative vacuum out of the house, and it's drawing through your outlets and just seeing how tight that building envelope is. And so it was reduced. In order to pass that test, you have to be even tighter. So it was reduced from a 0.3 CFM per square foot to a 0.25 this code cycle. Next slide, please. In an altered building, one of the big deals was that if you're replacing 20% more of your existing lighting, you have to update everything to the current lighting power allowance. So the code allows you to so much energy use for the amount of lighting in your building based on square foot. And so this is a huge way to save energy. It's also one of those things that saves you money because it requires fewer fixtures. And as fixture technology and ballast technology has increased, we have the ability to do this. And so this is a win in all directions. And one thing to add to John's comment or question about draw on the grid. The nice thing about the energy code and how the strategies that go about it is we do rely on renewables more so, but we're also relying on this tighter building envelope. And so as the building is more efficient, all elements, the envelope, the appliances, everything is using less energy. And therefore the draw on the grid becomes almost stalemated at some point. So that is the goal. Next slide, please. This was kind of a fun little thing. It's a fault detection diagnostic. So yeah, if you've got a building that's 100,000 square feet or more, basically you've got a technology in there that's saying, hey, here's the faults, here's the issues. The system is not healthy. This is what's going on with your HVAC. You've got these flaws in this and this. It's almost an ongoing commissioning on demand, telling you what needs to be updated and retrofitted. Next slide, please. Building performance factors. So if you are modeling, then you basically have to achieve a certain type of building. You have to prove the envelope's going to hit a certain target. And so now that target has been reduced by 10% since the 2018 codes. So it's overall health. Next slide, please. So I facilitate, oh, this is interesting. Okay, so I facilitate, that's what's going on. The slide deck is morphing. So I facilitate a group called the Regional Code Collaboration. We've been around for 10 plus years, and it's a very fluid group of jurisdictions from all over Puget Sound, from BC to Portland. And we started after the recession in 08, 09, I guess. And when nobody had resources, and said, we all have these sustainability goals, they're really lofty. We don't have staff to do that. So let's band together and start having this conversation and see if we can share resources. And it was a very successful model. It has continued to be. And it's not something that we have meetings every month. No, we have meetings when they are needed. We have trainings when they are needed. And so this is a huge part of my job, to bring jurisdictions in from not only King County, but that is why I'm here today, as to invite Gig Harbor to be a part of this conversation. You know, I chat with folks at Pierce County, City of Tacoma I work with very closely, because we want to move things forward together. We have these goals, and when we are not working in silos, when we are working as one voice, we have a better opportunity to achieve those goals. In fact, the 2015 Energy Code, the reason so many key pieces of those passed, which actually have created this pathway towards the code we have just approved now, is because we had 9 jurisdictions there testifying, saying, I want this. We represented, 30% of the state at the time. And those are big voices, and it's super important to have those partnerships. So again, I welcome you to stay in touch, and we will continue to partner together. Next slide, please. And in part of those partnerships, what we do as a group is we develop codes. And so we'll develop something, and I will encourage local adoption. I will support you in your local adoption. And then if, as a group, if we decide that this is something that we all want and is high priority, I will then take it to the state. And we represent it as, these have been drafted by the RCC, Regional Code Collaboration. And so again, we come to the state in one voice. One of these products that we produced over the last year is amendments to the 2018 Energy Code. And this is what Beth was talking about earlier. I took the Seattle amendments, modified them so they weren't so Seattle centric, because there was some inclusion in their codes that reflect other anomalies of their electrical code, which they actually have, and or their zoning codes and whatnot, and made it a little bit more generic, but still with the same requirements, and created package for jurisdictions and invited folks to adopt it. And so we broke it down into kind of 3 tiers. You could go the whole hog and adopt all of these elements. These are all amendments within that package. And that would include, decarbonizing elements, elements that are just that exist from the 2018 codes and are just where you've tightened the values. And so it's low hanging fruit. Your staff already know how to review and inspect for this. And then the pink dots down there is basically, that's some of Seattle's special stuff that they did that's really important that the rest of us could benefit from. And so over the last year, we've been working closely with, City of Bellingham, Shoreline. King County will be adopting this amendment package in 2018, in July of 2022. And a lot of these elements are what is ending up in the 2021 state code. And so if Gig Harbor opted to adopt some of these and kind of get ahead of the game, I would be happy to assist you. I have all the code language underlined, struck out. It's ready to go, just to be plunked into your ordinance format. So, and we have cost associated with this and whatnot. So something to consider. Yeah. And next slide, please. So other products produced by the RCC are these, and all of these elements I have proposed to the state, and we'll walk through all of them very quickly to make sure I'm giving you all time. But next slide, please. So we developed these in mass, and now we're saying, hey, these should really be considered and available for all jurisdictions. So we have put in a proposals, one that was in the 2018 IRC residential code, and one that will now be in the 2021 building code, which basically allows the reuse of salvaged lumber. So I come from solid waste division. That's a very high priority, is the circular economy. So how do we support that? So basically this says that if you had 2x6, dimensional lumber or of smaller size, you would assume that there's a spruce pine fir stud grade, and your design values would reflect that species and grade. If it's 2x8 or greater, or 4x material, then we assume a hen fir number 2 grade. And the way we came about that is that most material from our buildings that are being torn down are of hem fir, unless it's something from the 80s and beyond. There was such a huge building boom. The material wasn't prevalent enough, hem fir and Doug fir. And so a lot of what they contractors grabbed for was SPF. It grew fast. It could be, stocked, and it was used for, non-structural elements basically within a home. So this code section actually is a huge asset to folks that build with reused salvage materials, because it eliminates the cost of grading, which is quite high. So next slide, please. Okay, this one is construction and demolition material management. And when the slides are on a different format, and I don't know why they switcherooed, you'll be able to see the rest of the text. But this is an optional appendix, and it has been proposed for both the building code, which it has been approved so far, and the residential code, which is currently under scrutiny. But it basically just requires that 2 documents are submitted. That somebody at the beginning of the process at application has looked at what you're going to be tearing down and says these materials have value and should be considered to be sent to a salvage retailer or reused in another project. We're just asking folks to look at it and consider it. And then at permit final, or excuse me, at permit final, then you submit this waste diversion report that says these were all the materials, this is where it went, and this was diverted to salvage or recycle or landfill. For jurisdictions such as King County and Shoreline, and we track all of this. And so this may be of interest more at Pierce County level or Gig Harbor level. Next, plink it again, if you will, please, Cindy, thank you. And this is if it's coming up, this is a demolition optional appendix, which basically says that buildings that are 90 years or older, if they're going to be permitted for demolition, they actually need to be deconstructed. And so these are optional appendices. So it's not required, but if your jurisdiction values salvage material, you would probably want to adopt both of these in the 2021 codes. This particular appendix was only submitted as an amendment to the residential code, not to the building code. Next slide, please. And then electric vehicle charging. This got complicated. So at the residential code level, this is having challenges. And so essentially what we would be requiring is for all new buildings that have attached garages or carports would basically be required to have a 208, 240 volt 40 amp circuit installed in the building. And that's with a receptacle, outlet or junction box at the end. That's the requirement, and wouldn't be for an altered building. In the building code, what was approved already was one that is, we'll just put it that way, but it basically requires for non-residential buildings and residential buildings a certain amount of EV charging stations installed of the required parking areas, EV ready spaces, and EV capable spaces, which is just the conduit between the receptacle and your panel. And so Washington is a zero emission state. By 2025, 8% of all sales will need to be EV or otherwise. But Governor Inslee just upped this ante and basically said 100% of sold or registered vehicles they're hoping to have be electric vehicle by 2030. It was supposed to be 2020, or excuse me, 2045. So we have no infrastructure at this time, very limited. And so this is another equity piece whereby you would be requiring, say, an affordable housing development to have somewhat installed. So that vehicle type would be available to the occupants. Anyways, next slide, please. I think we're nearing the end here. There are other things that you could consider for your comp plan. King County came across somebody had an extra 20 million floating around, so a bunch of us applied for it. And one of the products out of that will be a heat pump rebate for low and moderate income households, basically fuel switching to get heat pump equipment in there in lieu of gas and what else they might have. So this is this fantastic program. I don't exactly know when it's going to go live, but I believe it is fairly soon. Next slide, please. And then CPACER. So this would, legislation happened last year that allowed counties to set up the CPACER program. And I'm sorry, I lost the slide that actually said what CPACER is. So, but it's a common tactic, and King County applied to be able to facilitate this program. Pierce County could do the same if you want to have conversations with them. I don't know if they're considering it. But essentially, basically, you have a bunch of low interest loans that are very long term. They're attached to the actual property and not the owner. And so, and it's to do energy efficiency standards and seismic upgrades. So you could, to existing buildings. And so you could do, all window updates or heat pumps or heat pump water heaters or whatnot. And at basically reduced costs, and then operational costs would of course be reduced. And so this has a lot of advantages. We're excited about it, and that is just being kicked off at King County currently. So I think that is it, Cindy. Yeah, thank you very much. So I've popped through a lot of things, but I very much encourage Gig Harbor to please participate in the RCC and to reach out to me as needed for any of your activities that you're going to be taking with respect to green building. If anything, I can just be a conduit between you and others that I know are doing other bits and pieces. If you want to talk more about incentives that have been successful for some jurisdictions that you'd like to be pointed out to, I'd be happy to do that. Funding options, we're part of my job this coming year is to figure out how to green affordable housing. What is that delta between base code building and a deeper green building for people who really need it the most? Lower bills, healthier indoor air quality. There's a lot of work that you can do with incentive zoning, or things that we're analyzing currently at the county in Bellevue is, indoor air quality adjacent to high volume arterials. So there's a lot of things going on that I may be able to just at least provide some direction and resources for. So thank you all very much. I greatly appreciate the opportunity. Roxy, are you talking or your headset is?
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. There's so many resources in that presentation. I hope we can capture all of them. I'm going to open it up for questions for Kathleen for the next couple of minutes, and then we can move into kind of our larger discussion about what this means for Gig Harbor. So maybe 10 minutes of questions for Kathleen.
Yeah, hi, Jenny.
Hi, Kathleen. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was really good and loaded with lots of information. And so I do hope that maybe Gig Harbor can participate, jump on board with the RCC. I have a specific question. I heard you talking about EV and charging, and you ran into some resistance there. And can you explain to me what that resistance was about?
It has been so very, very good question. And there has been a lot of challenges in both codes and both ways of applications. But with respect to the small residential, I'm not exactly sure what the actual intent is behind the opposition. There's a couple of ways you can go in the code game. And one is you can bring up a bunch of smoke and mirrors just to get an idea shut down that you really don't want to have, just fundamentally you don't want to have. And others are it can just be broken and you just really haven't found the right pathway there. So part of the conversations have been, because the building codes are not coordinated with the electrical code, it's a very separate beast done by a different body of folks, labor and industries, different process. They're not correlated. And so it is uncommon and uncomfortable to have electrical requirements in a technical building code because you don't have control over how the electrical code might change. And they're on different code cycles also. So I think they're a year different, you're off cycle. And so that has been part of the challenge in the whole EV discussion. When we were in early stages of the tag, that was a lot of it. Then, and I was asking for a lot more to be really full EV ready with all the bells and whistles. And the tag feedback was, no, let's just keep it with the branch circuit. And then the next meeting was like, no, now we need the receptacle and the branch circuit. And I got to the last meeting on Friday where they're like, this shouldn't be in the code. So it's an interesting road. These negotiations happen at the national level and it's just a matter of what is the true intent behind the people making the decisions. And so what is very critical is that the way we need the voices in September and to say, we want this. And because if we don't, it will get pulled out of the code. And I think that will be a huge disservice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Totally disservice. So the governing bodies, the decision-making bodies for the building codes and the electrical codes, are they two different bodies?
They are.
Okay, and so I think we know how to get to the building codes. How do we get to the electrical code people?
That is something I have to find out because I've never worked in that realm before. I don't know if it's an open or closed process.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think that is a conversation that has to happen because up until a few years ago, I didn't realize, again, I was in my own little bubble at Seattle and we can make amendments to the electrical code and not knowing really that most jurisdictions don't, that L&I actually does those inspections. And so there needs to be a marrying there.
Got it. Can I bring Paul Rice into this conversation, who's our building person in Gig Harbor, and talk about electrical codes and building codes, Paul?
Sure, absolutely. We're in the same place as King County, though, where we utilize L&I as the authority with jurisdiction for all of our electrical installations. And I really am not familiar with the process either, Kathleen, as far as the L&I process goes. I was just looking it up. We haven't had to deal with it in the past. We absolutely, though, have been a part of the State Building Code Council process over the years. We've been on tags over the last 20 years. We make local amendments to all of the codes throughout: mechanical, plumbing, building, fire. We haven't addressed energy code at the local level, though, primarily because our energy code is extremely stringent already at the state level. I think you'd mentioned that we have the most stringent electrical code in the entire nation, or energy code in the entire nation, part of your presentation. So it's already kind of tough to meet, I know, for our contractors to meet a lot of the requirements. Even right now, I'm having guys that are saying, I can't get a heat pump. I can't get a heat pump. Can I get a temporary CO for my house? It's on, it's back ordered 6 months. And so it is challenging, especially with now in the days that we're living with all of the, the COVID transportation issues and back orders and supply chain and all those issues. But we definitely support, all the things that you're doing. the one thing that really was interesting was the reclaimed wood appendixes and the amendments that you've promoted. We don't have anything like that, but that sounds like something that would be something we would absolutely want to look at for the lumber that's, you know, not graded. Have you had any issues though with, you know, I hate to say it, but with counterfeit, you know, people bringing in, you know, saying something was, you know, reclaimed, but it's actually just, you know, fresh poplar or something. I mean, I can see that because it's so expensive for the grading process. And we've had counterfeit stuff come in from Canada before with fake grade stamps. Now I could see, you know, bootlegged, you know, just non-labeled stuff being passed off as reclaimed lumber. So
That's a really good question, Paula. And I have not gotten any feedback from jurisdictions yet. And that requirement has been for the residential code has been there, you know, for 2+ years.
right.
But I have had a call on, can I counterfeit? Would that be all right? I got an outfit over here in the San Juans and I'd really like to do this. And yeah, so yeah, but it's wonderful to hear that you're familiar with the process. You've been heavily involved. And so, yeah, I look forward to partnership as we need those voices then to start saying, hey, state, you know, we need these things, and just continue so we can push and push and push.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Is it Roger? That's who's next on my.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the background noise. I'm kind of downstairs in a hotel breakfast room in Lisbon. I guess I find it really bizarre to think that there's so much pushback on providing outlets for EV chargers. It's not like we're providing EV chargers, like say a Tesla one or one for a Volkswagen ID4 or a Ford F-150 Lightning. All we're doing is adding another circuit with like a 60 amp breaker and, you know, putting an outlet in the wall. It isn't rocket science. I'm just puzzled at what the issues are. And I can understand if we're trying to dictate a charger itself, then you've got all sorts of stuff going on. But we're just providing. It's like asking people to add another dryer outlet to your house. I mean, do you think people would go bizarre and wacko over that? They'd say, well, so what? Just do it. You know, just make sure that your panel box is big enough. I'm puzzled at, other than politics, which it's possible, but I'm just puzzled with that. Do you have any insight on that?
And okay, so thank you, Roger. I super appreciate that affirmation, because before they didn't approve that segment, and this was just last Friday, to go to the final hearings, they actually said that I come back with a proposal to put that bit in as an optional appendix. And I thought that was ridiculous, because why would we have that little branch circuit, just the installation of that, just like you said, be an optional appendix when, you know, we're looking at less than $200 probably for that installation. It floors me that that's the recommendation that I'm supposed to bring back, because now we're down to a decision of, do I move it forward in public hearing as an optional appendix, or do I continue to quote unquote bully the way through with more proponents and speaking in pro, with the council potentially saying, we told you to come back as an optional appendix, and therefore we're going to choose not to approve this. That's where we're at right now. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so odd. The actual pieces of parts are almost, I mean, 200 is probably an overestimate even now. I had to add another 240 volt circuit for my Tesla supercharger, or my Tesla charger. And in a new house, that would take somebody 15 minutes. I mean, it is such a tiny thing that could do so much for folks. So, okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Kyla is next on my screen.
Hello. I just wanted to share a couple of things. One, that Pierce County went through the laborious residential reach code process that Kathleen spoke about in order to get that, residential requirement that new single family homes and townhomes do have required that EV readiness. So we have that at Pierce County, and it covers unincorporated Pierce County. So if that's just knowledge to, like, if you're thinking about making a statement or participating, giving public comment to SBCC, it might be something that is useful to bring up for places like Egg Harbor, where lots of people who live in that area also live in an unincorporated county, and why would it be different just across the street or something? So we do have that at the county level already. And then I also just wanted to comment on our CPACER program, because Pierce County Council did pass a CPACER ordinance, I think it was March 27th, directing county staff to develop a CPACER program, and that it must be ready to accept applications as of August 19th. So that's actually been something that I've worked a lot on. So if you have questions about CPACER and how Pierce County CPACER program is going to run, you can reach out to me directly. But we'll have a guidebook available soon, and then we'll start accepting applications in August.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Kyla. I forgot about that. So yeah, that's wonderful. And I'm hopeful that Whatcom County will be soon to follow, because I know they're looking at it. And then
I believe Whatcom County's already passed one,
okay.
And so is Clark County.
Any word on Thurston? Do you know if they've?
I am not sure.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kyla.
All right. So we have 20 minutes left, and I still want to, and I want to make sure we get through all the questions, but I also want to leave some time for discussion. So I'm going to cap, we can go John, Crystal, and Barbara, but then we'll move on to kind of a broader discussion after that. John?
Cool. Mine's actually really quick. Number one, can we get a copy of your presentation? There's a lot of data that I didn't get a chance to look at that was pretty darn good. This one kind of combination. Kyla, for the EV, is that actual wiring or just conduit?
That's a good question. I don't know specifically. Okay. I'm not an electrician, but
kind of leads into
they
my
have to
next
be
one.
it's what's being proposed now to SBCC. Okay. It's the same, should be very similar language.
And then that's my other question on it too, is like in your presentation, you had the wiring, but then you also had conduit as a choice too. I think it was for 10% of the houses. Is conduit part of the electrical code or part of building code? For me, if you require wiring, technology changes over the course of time. So I personally think conduit is better, because if you have the pathway, then you aren't doing destruction to the house, and you could upgrade whatever the wiring is. A good example of that is a network wiring inside your house. Everybody wanted Cat 5, Cat 3 upgrade. Now it's all wireless. But if you had conduit, it would have been a lot cheaper to do the upgrade in the technology. So I think we should look forward to more on the conduit with the potential of doing wiring interior, but making the two go hand in hand so the technologies can be upgraded as needed.
Yeah, thank you, John. That's a great comment. And there were a lot of folks in the IBC decision that were done that really wanted just to land it EV capable. And frankly, the House bill is where that whole proposal kind of bloomed from, was on EV capable. And so the council had that proposal. Then there was another proposal for EV ready and actual installation, and the two were merged. So that's how we ended up with that full matrix.
Okay, and then the cost right now, by the way, I've talked to a couple different builders. Retrofitting or in new construction, doing the EV port costs about $1,500 right now. And I agree, it's completely ridiculous when you're doing this long of a wire, but the electricians are charging about $1,500 for that. And that's without a charger on the wall.
We've got a great YouTube video.
I was saying I should become an electrician. Anyways, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Barbara.
Yeah, I just had a question about clarifying which of these building requirements are federally based. Are we able to tackle all of these as state building requirements? I'm
Yeah,
just
so-
wondering about the standards, because I could see that being an issue if we're messing around with or trying to make a requirement to federal standards as opposed to state standards.
yeah, great question, Barbara. When Roxy sends out the PowerPoint, just take a look at that one slide that kind of shows the whole process from national to state to local. And so the codes are developed at a national level, same way the state codes are. We all look at the last code and then we submit a bunch of code change proposals and we duke it out, and then you get a national code. Then it goes to Washington State, and then we make the modifications based on what our state RCWs and WACs and other needs are.
Okay. Because I'm also wondering if we could make some requirements based on critical areas ordinances. So for example, no natural gas lines in landslide hazard or earthquake / liquefaction hazard areas, so that you'd have the same concept, but it might be in a different part of the code.
Yeah, that one you'd probably have to check with Paul and your land use folks who manage those critical areas. I don't know if fuel gas code or whatnot would addresses land types, but yeah, it'd be something that we'd have to figure it out. Yeah.
Okay.
Good question. Thank you. And thank you all very much. Roxy, thank you so much for the opportunity to participate today and for everybody's great questions and comments. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. All right. So we don't have that much time left, but if you wanted to talk a little bit about kind of putting everything together between kind of where we're going as a region and a state, and how we as Gig Harbor can participate in these kinds of things. Like, I don't know if maybe from some of your perspectives we have the ability to offer incentives, but yeah, I'm curious to see how, when, where you all think we can impact building emissions. Go ahead, John.
I really like the idea and the incentives for not necessarily a cost base, but the incentives for upping the building permits for priority. I personally really like that idea, because I mean, I don't hear it much, but I guarantee everybody in the city would, on how long it takes to get a permit, get that permit filled. If you're able to speed up that process by being a little bit more environmentally friendly, I have a feeling people would jump like crazy on that one.
Yeah, because I think it also addresses a fear that a lot of people have of proposing those kinds of things, that it'll take longer to permit because it's not the way we've always done it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Roger?
Yeah. I guess the next question I had is, and I mean, there's a ton of stuff that the city could do. And some stuff that, may not apply to us just due to our size. I guess another question, though, more fundamental is, what do we, City of Gig Harbor, have time for staff-wise to write up all this awesome stuff? I mean, we could do building code stuff. We could do so many other things. And when I see this universe of stuff out there, I actually get tired of thinking, how, with our staff, with everything else that we have to do, just the day-to-day stuff, how much can we take on? I mean,
That's
I'm
a great
actually-
question, Roger. Kathleen, I think you probably have a good answer for that.
If one suggestion would be is participate in the RCC. It's kind of been a little bit on stall just because we're having resourcing issues within our own group and having to rehire and get the consultant contract put in place. But engaging that process so we can get these codes at the state, you don't have to deal with it at the local level. That may be of the best support to you.
Yeah. I think that Kathleen also mentioned like a ton of resources for people who have kind of already done this work. So we wouldn't have to necessarily reinvent the wheel, but it is a matter of staff time and council time and planning commission time to kind of get it through the legislative process if we decide to take on these kinds of things. Oh, did you have something else, Roger?
No, well, yeah, I did. At what point do we decide, either as a group or the city council or the staff, what do we take on?
That's a great question. I think that is definitely a question of like prioritization. And I mean, if we go further with a climate action plan, I think that's definitely something we can prioritize in that regard.
Okay, so hopefully it's a when we go forward with our climate action plan, not if.
Yeah.
I was going to say, if I could jump in really quick too. I mean, that's kind of what we're doing here, I think, is, laying this groundwork now in the comp plan, and, something we're going to have to reckon with here at some point as a group is determine whether or not, what does that look like in the comp plan? Are we talking about just adding in a few goals and policies smattered throughout the comp plan for now, and then tackling this more in depth when we get into our periodic update for 2024, or are we talking about drafting, a climate change element for, now that would lay a more serious groundwork to, move this process along a little bit faster, so those are some of the things we have to kind of keep in the back of our minds. And then, a great point about staff time, I think, and it's certainly something that we have to look at. And I think it does come back to priorities. And luckily, our council has a strategic plan now, which is great. And so I think that will help us a lot in getting this thing moved forward. So.
Thank you, Roger. Crystal.
Thank you. I was thinking about the building discussion in terms of City of Gig Harbor has a geographic area with an urban growth boundary. You have so many houses and buildings that already exist there. If I'm not mistaken, there's probably way more current housing than there will be in the near future added, like depending on what your population growth is, right? There's a lot of buildings. So there's a lot of where the opportunity for buildings comes in is maybe not as much in new building requirements, but in how do you improve the existing buildings that are there. So incentive programs for weatherization, for insulation, for window replacements, and for things like ductless heat pumps, I think could really have a big impact when you're looking at the existing buildings versus, I don't know, there's 10,000 existing buildings, but there's only going to be so many new ones built each year, right? Yeah. I don't know what the numbers are, but I think that is a place where you could have a bigger impact maybe. And I think you need both, but I just don't want to leave existing buildings out of the picture, especially those, individual residential ones. And there's a lot of old houses. Like when I lived in Tacoma, my house is over 100 years old now. It had some window upgrades. It could use new ones. It could use more insulation. I did benefit from their ductless heat pump program that the city of Tacoma offered as a lower income homeowner, and didn't have gas, although it was there, but it was turned off. But it was on electric baseboard heaters, and switching over to the heat pump gave me also air conditioning, and my bills went down so much that I figured out it would have cost me to keep running electric baseboards. I was like losing money by not participating in the program. It was that big of an impact. And for a lot of people, that can make a really big difference in terms of their quality of life and their air quality, as well as, being able to pay their bills. So that was a great program. I encourage that. And then related to homes, existing homes, and EV charging stations, I just wanted to throw in there, and this might complicate it for some people, but I think requiring the rapid charger stations in new homes is a good thing. I think more and more people are going to have electric cars in the future. I have an electric car. I've had it for 5 years, so it's a little bit older and I'm running on the max. Where I work, when I actually go to work, now I'm working from home, but maximum distance that I could go and get back on my one charge. I do not have a rapid charger. I plug my outlet into the wall in my garage. Works just fine, no problems for me. So what I want to say is that it's not a deal breaker. It doesn't prevent people from getting electric cars. It's not like it's absolutely required, because apparently, at least in my situation, it's not. So I think it's a nice thing to have, but it's not needed and it's not worth. I thought about, spending the money, especially when I first bought it, to do that. I plug it in at night, it charges overnight, it's fine, no problem.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Thanks, Crystal. So just time check. I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. We have about 5 minutes left before we have to wrap up. So let's go Georgina, Barbara, and Jenny.
Hi, I just wanted to say these 3 meetings that we've had so far, we've had some great presentations, and it really does tell you how much work is involved in developing a plan like this from scratch, where we have come from nowhere and we're going to develop a whole climate action plan. And I do have a little experience of a small community having done that. A city I used to live in on the coast of just 4,000 people, a population of 4,000. And it did take them 2.5 years to get it done, but they had an environmental compliance director. Other cities have a climate action manager. I think it is something I'd like to see the city look at for maybe 2023 to see if it could budget for someone who can oversee this program and bring a committee along that can really do this heavy lifting. That is obviously where we want to go. Sure. And I would hate to see us eliminate anything from the plan, because staffing is obviously going to be taxed if we don't do something to increase that an amount of staff hours to do a really good plan. So.
Okay, thank you, Georgina. Barbara, and then Jenny.
Yeah, I had a quick question about how these different, there's a lot going on at both the federal and the state and the local level. And I suspect that we probably already have a good slide on that, but clarifying where we need to create local regulations and where we will just be adopting something that comes from the state and kind of gets passed down. So I'm trying to figure out how the codes will layer upon each other. And then my other question is how some of these things will go into the infrastructure plan or CIP plan. Yes, we've been talking about requiring people to put these outlets in their house, but another big part of that is providing the infrastructure or the capital projects that will make it make charging an option for people who are in the area.
Yeah, these are good questions. I know that our CIP is definitely looking towards having more electric chargers. I guess we don't have Jeff with us anymore, but I know he's working on that. But yeah, these are definitely, all of these comments and questions, these are definitely things that you should be like documenting as the goals and the policies that you send to me as part of your homework, because I would love to have these thoughts kind of written down and cataloged. Thank you, Barbara. Jenny.
Yes, thank you. Great presentations today. And thank you, Georgina, because when I submitted my ideas for the 2023-24 budget, I included funding in there for not enough funding, I don't think, but I did include funding for a full-time, one full-time climate action committee person to take care of climate action. So hopefully when this comes before public and public has an opportunity to speak on our budget, then there'll be a groundswell of endorsement for hiring somebody new to get working on this climate so that it doesn't stall. We know our staff is taxed at the moment, overtaxed at the moment. So I think a new person or a consultant would be very helpful. Thanks.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you again, Kathleen. Thank you so much for your expertise and for answering all of our questions. You brought a lot of resources and data to us today. We really appreciate it. Thank you all for your participation. I really appreciate that we have such a thoughtful and what am I trying to say? Engaged group. As always, you can email me with resources, questions, rrobles@gigharborwa.gov. Yeah, I'm available to answer any questions about the process and anything like that. And as always, you can find the recordings, the agenda, and the notes, which I'm sure Roger will be sending me swiftly, on the climate change comprehensive plan amendment committee website, and I'll link that in my follow-up notes once I get things from our presenters. So yeah, just try and have your 2 goals and or policies and or whatever thoughts you want on the buildings and energy to me before our next meeting, which is July 14th. So thank you all very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Take care.
Actually, Roxanne, I'm going to make a quick adjustment. The meeting is Wednesday, July 13th, according to the calendar.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So want to make sure we get that date out.
That was one day
correctly.
off. Okay, yeah, 13th. Thank you, Cindy. I appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
All right, take care, everyone.
Thank you all very much.